Hey guys, today I've got Lily Ray on the podcast. Lily is a SEO by day, DJ by night, started as a politics major, transitioned into digital marketing, and we're so happy to have her on the podcast today. Lily, how's it going?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. Uh, Lily, could you just start by telling us a little bit about what is it that got you into search and SEO? What is it about this industry that you love so much?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I went to NYU and I studied politics, and I'm actually from the Bay Area and grew up very much like in the tech world. My father's a former distinguished software engineer at Sun Microsystems and Oracle, and my brother's a web developer. So grew up like learning, HTML and CSS and how to build websites and things like this all throughout my childhood. So when I was in college and I was studying politics, I like needed a job, while I was like literally still at NYU, and I found an SEO job on Craigslist. I didn't even know what it was at the time. It just said like social media marketing and SEO, and I definitely knew, social media. I was growing up on social media, but because I had that kind of like exposure to, I guess, like tech and the industry and access to my dad and brother to learn a little bit of, technical stuff to get me started, I fell into it really quickly, and I really fell in love with it. I think like the first couple times that I saw the impact of the work that I was doing on like Google Analytics and actually the performance of the website, it was just like I was hooked. So I kind of got out of that whole trajectory with politics and law school and everything and just dove right into SEO, and I've been in it ever since.
Really? So because you were kind of doing SEO as a gig while you were in college, you just scrapped the law career completely?
Yeah. It was actually right after like the 2008 recession, and it was not looking good for like some lawyer friends that I had, and even in New York, like they went to NYU law school and they still couldn't find work. So I was like, maybe I'll stick with this SEO thing because there's jobs out there and I'm really enjoying it. And turns out that was a really good decision.
That's awesome. Well, my wife also went to NYU, although she did not study anything technical. She's more of communications and PR.
Very cool.
Similar track, but also different. What year did you graduate from NYU?
2011.
2011. Okay, so it's 2 years after I graduated from Duke. It was an interesting time, right? Uh, post kind of Great Depression, and it was definitely kind of like a
Yeah.
tough economic climate. So where did you go from there? Did you start like consulting as a freelancer, or did you join a firm?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so my first ever job was a startup, like an online educational course startup called Examville. That was like way back when. I was literally going to an office on Wall Street, like in New York, and then wearing like business clothes, showing up and doing SEO for them. And um, then I switched to another in-house role for a year. That was at like a finance company where I just learned everything. Like I was the only person working on SEO there, and they were just like figure it out and make us rank, and it worked. And I spent that whole year just learning everything, including getting us in trouble with the Penguin update eventually, which that was also a very big learning experience.
Okay,
But after that, I joined the agency world, and I've been at two different SEO agencies for the past 13 years. So
awesome.
most of my
Well,
career.
that's great. Those are the kind of people I love to interview on here because you got a lot of reps in the SEO game and a lot of experience. And there's no one in SEO that can say they've won every time because Google will humble even the most bold and brave,
Oh
especially the
yeah.
brave sometimes out there. So, um, yeah, I guess could you kind of like talk about that a little bit in your career? Just
Absolutely.
just give some context into the wins and the losses.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, after you're doing it, now it's been 15 years for me. And I'm about to speak about this at a couple upcoming conferences. But when you just see the cycles over and over, it's really easy for like SEOs to jump in at a certain point in the cycle and say, oh, there's this really great traffic opportunity. I'm just going to blast this out. And then, eventually they get caught or they get demoted or penalized or something. And then you kind of learn the hard way. So, yeah, that happened to me. And I would say with the Penguin update was the first big experience. So that was 2012. I had no idea that buying links on Blackout World was against Google's guidelines. Like that's how oblivious I was because I couldn't necessarily distinguish between like, the stuff that Rand Fishkin was talking about on Moz.com and buying links on Blackout World. They just both seemed like viable SEO tactics. And in fact, they were working extremely well, for the time that I was buying the links. Like my company that I was working at was number one for everything we cared about.
Mhm.
So you learn the hard way. Like there's certain things that do work and there's certain things that get you in trouble. And that's been a really big like focus and kind of theme throughout my career, because so many people, like especially they come to agencies thinking that they figured out SEO, taking advice from certain people, and maybe they're on this trajectory where something's working really well. And we have to be like, whoa, 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 that's not going to work forever. Usually it takes them learning the hard way. And a lot of people come to us after and they say, can you help us clean up what we did here? So yeah, I think as much as it's boring and it's not, like the cutting edge, like manipulative tactic to trick Google, like turns out that trying to trick Google doesn't really work over time, especially if you're a big brand that can't afford to play those games.
Yeah.
So my brand in the past, say 14 years, has really just been like making sure we're doing things that are going to get us growth, but not in a way that's going to destroy everything we've built.
For sure. And Lily, how would you describe, like, what is the, like, philosophically, what is our role as SEOs in creating the internet? Like, how do you see that? Because so much of it is like optimizing pages to rank better on Google. There are ways to do that per guidelines. There's also ways to do it maybe beyond the code of what they actually want. And at what point is it spammy? And at what point is it like maybe excessive optimization that's not future proof? And at what point is it kind of right in the middle of the Goldilocks? And how do you distinguish between those?
Yeah, I mean, it's a decision for any SEO professional where they land in that spectrum, right? Because there's a version of doing SEO that I would say most of like the big brands, they have no choice but to do it the way that Google recommends doing it. And obviously we've seen some examples of this not being the case with like site reputation abuse, which we can talk about later, but like, when companies think that they found some method of kind of like doing something that falls into the gray area of Google's guidelines, and then it becomes very visible and Google says you can't do that. They crack down on it later. They develop new systems or new spam policies to demote those types of tactics. So just because something's working now doesn't mean it's going to work forever. So I think being able to anticipate like where Google's going and what it says in its guidelines, and Bing, by the way, has largely the same content policies, like just knowing those, it's almost like being a lawyer or like an accountant, right? Like you can tell your customer, listen, you can try to do those things, but it's either against the law or you're going to get caught by the IRS or whatever it is. Like that's up to you. But like, I don't feel comfortable as your, consultant telling you that you should be doing those things. I think you should do these things that are much more, like risk averse, and you're going to see maybe slower growth, but you're not going to risk those massive declines that you can see during algorithm updates. Because when you've dealt with enough of them, it's very hard to recover. It's easier to not get caught in the first place.
For sure. I feel like the two areas where people can kind of like really push the envelope and end up afoul of those guidelines. One is with AI content and mass production of content. The second one would be related to backlinks and building backlinks in a way that Google would deem unethical.
For sure.
So like I guess, what's your perspective on AI content? I know that obviously Google, their guidelines have shifted toward that. Do you recommend that your clients use AI to create content, or do you suggest that they just do it all human?
It's not necessarily all human. I mean, I personally am using what I call like AI assisted, approaches to SEO and content a lot lately. Like I'm using AI tools almost all day, every day at this point, but I'm not using it to generate the content for me, right? And I don't advise that clients do that. And I just don't think it works very well. Of course, there's a lot of ways that you can like, combine AI tools with your own data or your own connected to your own database and like create really, really like customized prompts and everything where, yeah, the output doesn't really feel like AI. So there's smart ways of doing it, I think, but where a lot of people got into trouble or are getting themselves in trouble is with the scaling of purely AI content or very, very lightly edited AI content, because they feel like it might be working because you might see some growth for like a month or 2 months. But now that window is getting shorter and shorter. I think Google's getting better and better at identifying that type of content and demoting it. So, I don't, just working at an agency and representing pretty large companies, it's not something that we would want to risk with our clients. Also, just, customers and readers don't love reading AI content, right? I think that's the more important conversation is like, it's very important to our clients that they have a brand voice, that they're, providing value, they're providing accurate information, all of this. So I think there's a lot of ways to use AI to assist the content creation process and speed things up in really interesting and exciting ways. But yeah, the more human oversight there is in the content creation, generally, the better it's going to perform.
Yeah, we use AI extensively for the content brief generation step, where we want to bring in as much context about the business into the context of the article that we're writing or the landing page. Also, like research, like bringing in factuality, bringing in essentially figuring out what does Google have inside that knowledge graph around this topic. How do we extract all those facts, these the triples out of their essentially their knowledge graph, and figure out what do we need to put into our content such that we can create that information gain over the competitors. The AI is really good at helping us get to that point. But the gap is like, if you just take all that and say, now generate me a landing page or generate me a blog post, and it's a full AI output that we're using and publishing on the web, I think that's where a lot of people, like to your point, run afoul. But my belief on this, and feel free, I'm sure some people will disagree with this. I do believe that we're, if not at, close to the point where it's possible to generate full AI outputs that are as good as a human could do, if not even better, provided that you put the right inputs into the sauce. When you're cooking it up, like you got to get the right inputs in there. And I think the output can be extremely high quality, with some human effort in adding in the images and the videos and putting in the right, I guess, human effort constituents of the content. That part, when people just throw AI images and those AI images have no EXIF data, there's a bunch of gaps there, right? Where that Google can see that this is not authentic. It's not really a human building this, because there's some missing pieces there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think, so for example, if you take, and I've been doing a lot of this lately, something that's really cool about the AI tools is when they have a good enough understanding of who someone is, so they quote unquote know who I am, that I can ask, what have I said on X and Blue Sky and LinkedIn about, this topic? And it'll kind of like summarize a lot of what I've said on different social media sites, and it'll obviously like cite where I've said that. So that's actually really good. Like for me, if I want to okay, I need to go write an article about all the things I've said about Reddit, because I've posted 8,000 things about Reddit over the years, but I need them all in one place, right? It's not perfect, but it does a really good job of like, here's all the different things that you've said. So I could start with that and then write an article, or it could even give me the outline for the article. That saves me so much time, but it's using my insights, my opinions, right?
Yeah.
So I think the more that you can take original insights and opinions and authentic like conversations that human beings are already having, and then use AI to kind of structure them and format them and enhance them, I think that's perfectly fine. And if not, to your point, sometimes it comes out better than you would have written it yourself.
Yeah, I love that. We do that extensively now with my team, because I don't have the time to answer every question for them. Neither do you, right? And so if you can, what I did is I just took everything that I've published on YouTube, the transcripts, my blog posts, our internal research, and I just dumped it into a notebook LM, and I give it to the team. And
Amazing.
I'm just like, this is my brain. Ask me any question you want, and you'll get the answer that you need, right? Whether it's for like a response to something on social media that I just don't have the time to look at, or it's more of an internal question about, hey, how do we solve this problem in our software? So I think that's so cool. And I even did that when I was studying. There's a book called Introduction to Information Retrieval, which is just, it was written like over 10 years ago. A lot of the science behind information retrieval systems hasn't really changed that much. Like it's been determined, like the smart guys at MIT and Caltech figured this stuff out 10, 15 years ago. SEO community is like reading these books, including me, from way back when, and they're still relevant. So I just popped that book into a notebook LM and then started asking it questions.
Amazing.
And it was so cool. I love that we can do that. And for the readers tuning in out there, if you wanted to learn more about SEO and you want to learn more about it from Lily's perspective or from my perspective, or really anything for that matter, I highly recommend just check out that tool. It's so powerful and it's free. All right, let's move on to a slightly related but a little different topic. SEO loopholes and weaknesses in Google's algorithm. What do you see working right now that you think 1 year from now, just call it, it's not going to be ranking, it's not going to work?
Well, I would say there's been like a pretty big series of events related to what the SEO industry calls parasite SEO and what Google calls site reputation abuse. That's been a really big cat and mouse game that's been very public and very visible, as both in terms of SEOs capitalizing on these tactics and also in terms of Google cracking down on it to some extent, not 100%, but trying to crack down on it. And this whole saga has been very interesting because it's been years. I don't even know how many years. If you really think about like the nature of parasite SEO, which is essentially latching onto some website that has great authority in the search results and great propensity to rank really well organically. And if they do like guest posts, or there's a certain section of the website where you can submit content or contribute content or whatever, you're basically capitalizing on that website's authority to drive visibility and links, and whether it's like affiliate links or backlinks or whatever back to your own website. That's been something that's existed in the SEO space in one form or another for a very, very long time. What I think is very interesting is, it's small like SEO consultants doing this on a small scale. It's also some of the biggest brands on the internet doing it on a pretty large scale as well. And Google mentioned, or they introduced this notion of site reputation abuse. I think it was during the March core update of last year, 2024. And they told everybody that they had 2 months to prepare before they started cracking down on it. And they did crack down a little bit in May. And they, throughout the year, told us that it would be this algorithmic thing that's going to launch. And eventually it turns out seems like they couldn't figure it out algorithmically because they still haven't launched these algorithms. So they're just doing it manually. So there's this web spam team at Google is manually penalizing people that they believe violate the guidelines. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, that's an enormous cat and mouse game to have human beings manually reviewing sites that are in violation. And it turns out they can't stay on top of it. There's just sites that are every day getting away with different versions of this. And it's going to be impossible for the web spam team to keep up with everything. So that's been a really interesting development. But I don't know that that's where I would put all my eggs in my client's SEO basket right now. Like, let's try doing that. Just doesn't seem like a great idea.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like you talked about this in some other presentation we were talking about the Google Hidden Gems update, where they wanted to introduce users' perspectives, like real human perspective. Where do we find human perspective? We find them on forums a lot, right? Where there's this diversity of opinion. And the power of that is like we have different people shedding their perspective in one place, which is so rare to find on the internet outside of forums. So in there you see forums, there you see sites like Reddit. And so you get perspective there. But sites like that also ranking for every SERP under the sun, where we see Reddit pretty much, that's also in a sense topical dilution. Because if you're an authority on every topic, you're an authority on no topic, right? According to the topical dilution site focus score algorithm. And so, well, this is for me actually one of those areas of SEO that I'm still puzzled by, and I'm trying to understand better, because sites like that, technically their topicality is not focused. It's so broad, and yet they're able to rank really well. And I think it's because of that hidden gems factor where they're presenting a unique opinion and perspective. And so somehow they're able to overcome the dilution that they have, because they're topically all over the place and not focused, and yet they still rank well, which is a trend that we don't see with non-forums. Like if you're another type of site, like even let's just like pick any brand that you work with, you can actually kill the rankings of a brand by just veering off topic. And I regret to say, like for my first startup, I'll just be honest. I want to also share like things that we've done that didn't work. With my first tech company, which is a live entertainment ticketing aggregator, we actually, because we were selling concert tickets and sports tickets and theater tickets in New York City and all over, we started to talk about music events. Like what did Dispatch, like their new album and like all this other stuff. And it wasn't ticket adjacent. It was like putting us more into like the pitchfork style topicality that Google saw us no longer as a ticketing authority, but as like this music website. And that is topical dilution, and it really hurt us. It prevented us from ranking well. I know that now. I didn't know that. We didn't know that at the time. So we had to make that mistake. So this for me is still one of those riddles that we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, It feels like a bit of a cop-out response, but I just truly believe this at this point because I look at this every day. I don't think Reddit is getting the same treatment that most sites get as far
I agree.
as what it takes to rank on Google or what you should do or shouldn't do. I mean, literally just this morning, Glenn Gabe wrote a new article about the fact that Reddit is using AI translations to scale content translation across millions of URLs. And he also put a screenshot in the article that he wrote of Google's guidelines, which literally says that mass translations using AI is against the guidelines. It's a form of scaled content abuse. So it's
Unless you
like,
read it.
unless you're Reddit, of course. So like, there's all these different things that Reddit seems to be able to get away with. Reddit specifically, like at this
Yeah.
point, there's doesn't seem like there's any other site with the level of treatment that they're getting. There's certainly no other site that's grown to the level that they've grown. I've never seen anything close to that in the history of doing SEO. And I work with Systrix all the time. I talk to them all the time. They're the tool that projects SEO visibility for different sites. They've also never seen growth this big. I think the closest that ever happened was like Amazon or Wikipedia a long time ago, but Reddit's much bigger. So yeah, what Reddit's doing is not what I recommend sites consider as like, oh, this is the North Star of what we're going to do with our SEO strategy. And to your point, it's important to understand that Google can do different things simultaneously, right? So like what you described with like topical authority and making sure that you kind of stay within this certain like topical radius of things that you specialize in. I do think that's very true for most publishers and most sites. But I also think that there's another thing happening, which is that Google started to elevate forum websites. Like it's just the data is so obvious. It was 2023, it was July 2023. That's when Reddit started to explode. That's when Quora started to explode. And not only that, I think I have a list of 5,000 plus small forums, like niche forums or medium to small forums or sites with forums, where the forums section exploded starting in July 2023. A good example of that is Rick Steves. It's a travel website. They have a bunch of different things happening on that website, including e-commerce, including travel guides, including, you know, Rick's videos about him going to different places. But there's a forum, and the forum's been there since like the 90s, and it exploded, right? Just the forum in July of 2023. So like that happened. I think we're starting to see Google dialing that back a little bit right now with the March core update that just happened. But those two things can be happening in parallel, right? So it's like Google is thinking about topical authority, but they're also boosting forums, and it's just a question of like which is the best result for which query. But it's important to remember for SEOs, a lot of us get like stuck thinking that things always work a certain way, but it's just important to remember there's lots of different systems happening simultaneously.
Yes, for sure. And that's the part, that's the riddle, is to understand how that equation is changing. Reddit is breaking like our correlation model because we know that high quality content, as we can quantify it, is associated with ranking better. We know that to be the case, right? We know that backlinks, sites and pages that have good backlink profiles, that's going to rank you better. UX signals, sites that get strong UX behavior when people are on them and in the SERPs will outperform. You can take a SERP where you can see every other website in there, especially that should be top 1, 2, 3, that has better metrics than the Reddit link, and Reddit will still outrank them. It's literally like they have their thumb on the scale and they're pushing Reddit up in the SERPs.
100%.
And there's just no other way to beat them. Doesn't matter how much authority you're building to the page, doesn't matter how much you're boosting it, it's still not moving the needle. And we're still trying to see, is there a point at which you can overtake Reddit? We've seen you can overtake lots of other sites, but it just doesn't seem to be the case that you can overtake Reddit, which is kind of a problem.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. You know, I have a couple of like sites and even friends that I have or people that I know where it's like Reddit, like if someone says something bad about you or your company or your brand on Reddit once, and like that's actually a big part of how Reddit works. It's a place for people to go anonymously air their grievances or talk about someone or something or talk about this horrible experience that they've had, which in a sense that's good. You know, we need authenticity and truthfulness on the internet to understand certain things, but it's also, I think it skews in that direction in a really big way. So sometimes you can Google a brand name. Like there was one time when I Googled, I think it was like buy a Toyota RAV4 or something. And it was
Great
like
car.
a Reddit. Yeah, that's actually the car that I have. And it was like buy, or it was like, you know, maybe a Toyota branded result number 1, but then number 2 was like, don't buy this car on Reddit, right? And then you go into the thread and someone says, actually, I was wrong. They gave me a faulty one. It's actually a great car. But like that's stuck at number 2. And I'm like, what? Like, it's like Google doesn't care if it's like egregious or like just like
Mhm.
really bad for branding because it's like, well, it's authentic, so it must be true. It's like, it's not true. It's not always true.
Right. Just what someone just popped out of their brain in like a
Yeah.
50 character garbage post on Reddit, whether that person's reputable or not, that's what's taking up the SERP. And what happened to the
Yeah.
right to be forgotten, right? Remember, we had that. Um,
100%.
we
And
see
like,
stuff
we
on Reddit
also,
that's years old that's still ranking super visible with really negative titles.
100%. Yeah. And another thing that really kind of bothered me about this whole like over dependence on Reddit on Google search is that Google had done so much work between, let's say, like 2017 and 2022 to really like showcase like EEAT as this really important consideration for ranking. So experience, expertise, authority, and trust, which led to like a lot of very high authority sites appearing, especially for like medical queries and financial queries and things like this. Now Reddit gets to appear, right? So it's like if you type, I have this, like a certain type of cancer or something, you used to see like the Mayo Clinic and Harvard and, Medical News Today and Healthline, these types of sites. Now you might see like a bunch of different people on Reddit talking about something, which like maybe it's fine, but a lot of the times there's not great advice in there, and Quora as well. Google was really relying on Quora for medical queries, and it's like, what happened to EEAT? Like, it's not just all about what some random person is saying about this medical
No,
condition. It's not super safe.
no, it's taking us in the wrong direction entirely. And there's so many things about Reddit that I'm really worried about. Like the first thing is I have a Reddit account. Okay. I don't think I've ever posted, but I have a Reddit account. My Reddit account is actually ghost banned. If I ever
Mm,
post on a channel, it shows to me that I posted, but anyone else will look and see that it's not there. I've never done anything on Reddit that I shouldn't, right? I've just been like a very passive user, occasionally going in, looking at Porsches and like, the Porsche subreddit or whatever, ski subreddit, the stuff that I'm into. Um, and yet Reddit has decided that because my user account wasn't active for years, that user no longer gets to share their opinion. Well, I understand trying to keep the conversation pure and eliminate spam from the narrative. That's important to me and it's important to Reddit, I'm sure. But I think that the Reddit content moderation guidelines are really severely fucked. And sorry to be so candid, but I think that there's a huge problem with the platform because one, it's not clear who gets to post and why. And number two, it has such a strong negative bias that we're
yeah.
not even really sharing authentically, like whether this is a good product or a bad product, is just negatively aligned from the get-go because everyone's just trying to be negative on the platform. So almost no
Yeah.
matter what product you go and you look up on that platform, you're going to see a negative bias unless the company has done some sort of Reddit strategy where they specifically focused on it as a channel. And so I think that for SEOs, because you see Reddit ranking, if you just look at page one visibility, forget like where you are on page one, just if being on page one for keywords in a topical universe, you will see Reddit almost a feature there for any
Any
topic,
topic.
any industry.
Yeah.
It's there everywhere. And so
Yeah.
Reddit actually, what happens on Reddit for those keywords is almost nearly as important as what's happening on our website, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, last thing I'll say about it, because like sort of airing our grievances about Reddit, the moderators can be a little bit arbitrary from subreddit to subreddit. So for example, the moderation changed in our SEO a couple of years ago. Before that, it was a resource that myself and many others really enjoyed. Um, in the last couple of years, they have been known to delete comments that they don't like, right? Literally, that's the only criteria. We don't like them or we don't like this person. So they've deleted comments from Danny Sullivan when he goes in there from Google to talk about on Google's, from Google's perspective, this is what we think. Deleted. We don't like him, so we're going to delete that. I recently had one deleted where someone asked a question about an article that I wrote, and I chimed in as me and answered the question thoroughly, and it had like tons of upvotes. They deleted that. So it's like, why are if these different subreddits are behaving in these different ways, and Google's elevating that as a source of truth, it doesn't feel to me like the source of truth.
Right. And then like for just a moment to be nice to Google for a second, because a lot of times it's easy to be negative and critical. Everyone's a critic. What else is out there that they could use that has such perspective? Like Reddit is not perfect. It's certainly not. But
Yeah,
also if you're them, what else do you do? Quora is like so spammed and
so
full of
spam.
garbage.
Yeah,
So it's kind of
yeah.
like the only thing.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of segue into like what else is working in the SEO space right now and what Google's been elevating because it's not just Reddit. So there's I have a slide from a recent presentation that I did that shows the growth of a bunch of different social media platforms as far as their visibility on Google. So like Threads now, Threads are being indexed and ranking quite well. Individual Instagram posts are ranking really well. LinkedIn is ranking tremendously in many cases.
Yeah.
I'm actually right now doing a quick analysis to see like does it matter how authoritative your LinkedIn profile actually is in terms of what you can get to rank on Google? Like Google's elevating a lot of like firsthand conversations and experiences and posts and everything like that. TikTok is another big one as well. So it's not just Reddit. I think that it's a way for them to combat AI spam in the search results by elevating real human or supposedly real human posts and conversations.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see a lot of LinkedIn for a lot of queries. Very, very popular, and that's become a parasite SEO destination of choice.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
the other trend that I see, it's kind of annoying, is like keywords that no one is searching. People like use and then they make a joke out of it, where they're like, "Who taught so and so how to do something?" Like my friend James Dooley does this with Core I all the time. He's like, "Who taught Core I, Tugboat Gabor, semantic SEO?" James Dooley taught Core I that, and he just posts
Sure.
it on
For sure.
LinkedIn, and then Google will do the AI overview and put that as the answer. So there's all kinds of like annoying stuff like that that happens in the search engine. It's still funny. Um, but for a professional purpose, you can see like there's a lot of weaknesses in the way that the search engine is set up today. And to your point earlier, which you said, like Google's trying to work on these problems and yet they haven't been able to find a solution. Why do you think that is?
It's a really hard problem to solve. I mean, I think like to your point earlier in the conversation, the AI generation, content generation at this point looks and feels so much like a human being that, to solve this problem at scale where there's a lot of this like kind of homogenous AI feeling content that people are reading and not enjoying in the search results. And Google's getting so many complaints about people that they feel like everything's AI generated. They feel like everything's overly SEO spammed, on Google. So how do you combat that? Well, one switch that you can flip really quickly is let's just only show user generated content everywhere. That's kind of the opposite, even though there's a lot of AI spam on these platforms as well. Let's just over index on showing the Substacks and the Mediums and the LinkedIn's and all these like supposedly real human conversations. Well, it's no secret that for many years now, people have been spamming these platforms. And like another one that I thought was really funny recently was Hub Pages, which I haven't seen Hub Pages in my life since I started doing SEO in college. Like that was the beginning of my SEO career, posting things on Hub Pages and Dig and Squidoo and Reddit. Like it's all come full circle all the way again. But Hub Pages is working really well on Google now. So this is all kind of this like parasite SEO conversation where you can just submit content to these different platforms. And because Google loves the platform, that content can rank really well. I think it's a silly kind of like outcome or oversight that Google probably knows this is happening, but the value of the actual real UGC that they get on those platforms is so helpful for them to combat this like AI spam problem that I think
Right.
they're just over indexing on that for now, but I don't think it'll last forever.
Interesting. Yeah. And if you think about it, what makes something good UGC content versus the parasite SEO content? That's something they're going to have to figure out. How do they know
Mm-hmm.
when it's the kind of content that they want? They have these best of kind algorithms that for a SERP, they don't want to just present, let's say, service pages all the way down. They want to present different perspectives. So they want some
Mm-hmm.
listicles, aggregators. They want a couple service pages. They want some informational pages. They want different types of content. And so those best of kind algorithms are trying to find that UGC content on LinkedIn or any of these parasite channels and present them. Not too many of them, but enough that we have that user perspective in the SERP. And it's a cool algorithm. I think it makes a ton of sense. It makes SERPs more dynamic and interesting. And I
Yeah.
think it's kind of their solution out of the problem of like, well, why not just have an AI overview for everything and just give users a text response, right? Where like where do we go for search? Do we want to go more in the direction of ChatGPT, where there's no blue links, there's just a splat blob of information, which is potentially useful, potentially not, not necessarily attributed to the source, and really kind of one message versus Google, where there's a diversity of responses and answers that have a slightly different perspective. Right? Where do we
Yeah.
go? And I think that's going to be an interesting question to see where they go.
Yeah. And I think like they're heart is in the right place. I don't know if a corporation can have a heart, but like, the idea behind like,
They used
let's
to.
elevate, exactly. Let's elevate some level of user generated content and real original perspectives in the search results to sprinkle in with the conversations other people are having, which I think is how they would justify having Quora for medical queries, right? Like, we want to hear from real cancer survivors who want to share their story, and they do that on Quora. So I understand the nature of how it works. I think the problem is that the onus is now on these platforms to mitigate spam and lots of like affiliate spam and garbage and misinformation. Like on Quora, it's so easy to find AI spammers who are just creating these fake accounts with Midjourney, profile pictures and fake
Yeah.
bios, and then they're just spamming affiliate links everywhere. So that's, to me, that's a Quora problem. But Quora is
Mhm.
not going to do anything about it until Google penalizes them. So I think that, listen, if Google wants to rely on all these social platforms where users are actually really doing a lot of engaging, authentic conversations, there needs to be better moderation. Like, Reddit can't get away with AI translations and millions of pages that other sites can't do that. It has to be an equal playing field where, in order to compete in SEO, you're playing by the same rules. And user generated content's on Google's list of site reputation abuse violations. If you have too much user generated content that's spammy and low quality, that's actually a site reputation abuse problem. So I'm like, why are the social media sites and the hub pages and the mediums and the LinkedIn's not being also penalized when other publishers are being penalized?
For sure. And I, in this crisis of confidence about what is real and what is fake, Google has like the timer has started, and there's a certain amount of time that they're going to get before people like me, like I actually prefer to get certain information from private groups, private WhatsApp channels and Facebook groups and communities that are not publicly discoverable, not indexable. And in that, there's a beauty, which is that the content that's produced is not monetizable. There's no direct, like publicly monetizable front. This is just private content stored and shared with this private community. There's
For
like
sure.
for the cancer survivors out there who are trying to learn about this thing, they have their own spaces to have these conversations in a private way, away from that spam. And so Google has a certain amount of time where clean it up, or if they're not able to, people will themselves shift the user behavior away and find those spaces where they can find that information and engage with people who are sharing authentically, right? So if
Yeah.
they can't figure it out, user behavior is going to move, as I think it
100%.
in some ways already is.
I think what we might see that with Reddit. I think the conversation is starting to change a bit where, for the last like 5 years, you could read 8,000 posts and articles about people saying, oh, I'm having trouble finding what I'm looking for, and I only can find it on Reddit. So I have to always append Reddit to my search query. Or Reddit's internal search is not great, so I always have to go to Google and type the word Reddit. Like, you hear that a lot. But now you're starting to hear early signs of Reddit's full of spam. I'm not having the same experience that I had anymore. I don't like using it as much because I feel like it's filled with AI or spam or whatever. So like, that's catching on now, and it has to go in a direction where they're taking care of that problem in a really aggressive way, or Google's going to eventually not be able to rely on Reddit for such great content.
For sure. Awesome. Well, Lily, let's shift gears a little bit. I know that you're doing a lot of research with LLMs and what does it take to get discovered inside LLMs. Could you talk to me a little bit about some of that research and what you've learned so far?
For sure, yeah. It's definitely still a burgeoning, part of my career and everybody's career, and we're still all figuring this out as we go. So I think a lot of it's still early. I've been pretty focused on AI overviews on Google specifically, but I'm starting to use some new tools now to understand, what it takes to rank in the other LLMs as well. But I would just say, like, just using my own name as a case study, because I do tend to use that a lot to understand how SEO works. I think it's really interesting what the potential is when Google understands you or whoever as an entity, and the large language models also have a solid, like, confident understanding of who a person is or what a brand is. And a lot of that can be influenced by obviously what you're saying about that person or that brand. Like, for example, if I ask Claude, who is Lily Ray, and it says my title from my last title, not my current title, but the one before, you can see where that's coming from in many cases. Or you can then go on the internet and like find, oh shoot, my YouTube description has the old title. You can start to like make these tweaks to kind of influence what it says, which is kind of just classic SEO, but I think it's becoming much more important, like what specific language is used across a lot of the different sites that they're referencing. Turns out they're referencing, Reddit, a lot of the big authoritative sites, but also like the social media sites and the forums and everything. So just making sure that you're getting your branding and your messaging right across the different channels and different sources that they frequently cite is more important than ever.
For sure. And I think that's the good kind of SEO. This is us trying to help the LLM get it right when
For
it's
sure.
solving almost like an insurmountable task, which is congealing all this data from all these different disparate websites that have slightly different perspectives, normalizing it and creating consensus. Google has the same problem. And how do you do that accurately and put the right information in? So I think it's really cool that you're looking at that for each LLM independently because they get their information from different sources. One of the
Yeah.
things, one of the approaches that we tried is I call it like the interrogation method, where we interrogate the LLM. We ask it a bunch of questions. So let's say like Lily Ray, like who is Lily Ray? Where does Lily Ray work? What does Lily Ray do? Where does Lily Ray live? And ask it all these questions, right? And you can use AI to come up with a good list of questions, right?
For
Maybe let's say
sure.
100 questions, like a lot. And then you hit them with every question and say, where did you get this information? What are the root documents that you use to figure out this information? So you described it like you figured out that that irrelevant or old content was coming from a YouTube bio that you had,
Hmm.
right? You can also ask it to tell you where did you get the data from? And it's not like it's perfect. It does hallucinate sometimes, but you can get a lot of insight about what root documents it's using. And that I think is super important. And I'm going to talk about this at SEO Week. If we can analyze the root documents of each LLM, we'll understand if we want to put our story into the LLM, how do we do this? How do we do that? We can either go to the root document itself, like your YouTube bio, for example, and update the content, and it'll take some time to refresh, but it will eventually. Um, or we can go and create new content on websites that we know already are visible in ChatGPT, knowing that eventually, if they were already visible and they already have root documents in their corpus, then we can get our story into the LLM. So I think it's exciting. It's like the brave new world or the wild wild west, and there's still a lot that I don't fully understand. It's also challenging because like chat is like it's not a read write interface really. It's a read interface. You read from their
Hmm.
corpus, but Gemini is a read write interface where you can have Gemini update its own data set by telling it to gather the latest information from your YouTube bio, for example, and it will do
Yeah.
that and update
Yeah.
itself. So they all have slightly different properties. And even like XAI, that gets data from Twitter, right? So there's no like, I don't think there's like a single uniform solution for getting visible in all LLMs,
Yeah.
at least that I know of. Maybe besides getting indexed by Common Crawl, because I know that all the LLMs use the Common Crawl data set, but that's
Yeah.
also challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it boils down to just making sure that what you want to appear on there is being really clearly said somewhere, and ideally somewhere that they're looking at very often. So
Yeah.
that's why I think, I've been talking about EEAT for years, and a really big component of that is having individual experts at your company having a presence, right? And having like a following. So like if you have somebody that's an expert that represents your company, they should be sharing their perspectives and doing it across different platforms. So every day I post on X and Blue Sky and LinkedIn and sometimes Threads and like other places. Guess what? All that stuff shows up. If you ask a question, the LLMs cite each of those different platforms. So it's tedious, but you have to like get in front of the messaging that you want to convey, have it on your website, but also have it kind of like echoed across different platforms as well. And the more that they see it, the more likely they're gonna get that information right.
Cool. So what I'm hearing there is like you think that organic social is a great way to promote discoverability of any brand, their content inside LLMs. You think that that's like the fastest and also free way for them to make sure they're getting, or not make sure, but increase their odds of having their information discovered and told in a certain way inside LLM.
I think like it depends on the brand. So like if you're BMW, I don't know that like what some random person is going to say on Twitter or X is going to make it into the large language models, but they might have a lot of other data and content that they can pull from more authoritative sites, for example. But I do think they really are leaning heavily into sites like X and Reddit and LinkedIn to understand certain beliefs about certain things. So that's why you can post top 10 whatever on LinkedIn and it actually pulls from that. So I do think it's important to just like, yeah, get your message out there across as many platforms as possible and as consistently as possible. Because I am seeing like more than I would have expected, especially sites like Reddit. They're really leaning into those conversations.
Interesting. I think it's also interesting there, like it's sort of the changing frontier of search where instead of optimizing for rankings on Google, we're doing things now that we're like, I don't really care how Google sees this part. I'm doing this for the LLM, right?
Yeah.
I want to make sure the LLMs can see me. And probably that'll have other benefits for referral traffic and branded traffic and people searching through the search engine and finding you, which will help your discoverability and visibility in Google too. It's pretty cool. But you posted something about LinkedIn specifically and LinkedIn Discover and how that connects to, I think, ChatGPT. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't like I think a lot of people read my tweet and were like, "Oh, I can't believe Lily didn't know that." Listen, I've known about LinkedIn being a platform for either parasite SEO or spam like for years. Obviously, this has been working for years. I just don't tend to engage in spammy tactics, so I don't do those things myself as much. The test was to see specifically with my own LinkedIn Pulse account. So you post an article on LinkedIn Pulse. How quickly can I get that into Google's AI mode? Because I just got access to AI mode. And I was surprised to see just how quickly the whole thing happened. So I posted an article that I wrote, you know, with some insights. Again, I used actually ChatGPT to summarize a lot of the things that I've already written about and already said. Starting point to like, okay, let's create an article about what are the 10 things to know about Google Discover. Published that on LinkedIn Pulse. It got indexed, you know, pretty much instantly, and then started ranking like 5 hours later. Not only ranking, but ranking in the featured snippet, position 1 on Google. It's still position 1 today, a few days later. But not only that, because it's position 1 on Google, you know, it starts to appear in ChatGPT and Google's AI overviews and AI mode all in the same day. So that was a really interesting example. And I think a lot of people said, well, your LinkedIn profile is very authoritative. So that's going to be more likely to happen for like LinkedIn profiles that have a lot of followers and everything like this, which is probably true. But it's just interesting to me how quickly the whole thing can happen. And that if you can get in Google's index and Google's results quickly, of course, you're going to show up in, you know, tools like AI overviews and AI mode pretty quickly as well. So it's all connected now. It's, you know, Claude can crawl the internet now. So it's all kind of going in that direction.
Yeah, I wonder if they're getting the direct data from LinkedIn, like if LinkedIn's pushing it to Google, or if they're just crawling it and figuring out how do they find those more authoritative, important accounts, and they just monitor them for new posts. But you can just imagine how much crawling infrastructure they need to
Oh yeah,
like pull that data in real time. It's a lot.
yeah, for sure.
But they're Google, like they got the resources for it.
Exactly.
And Lily, what do you think about like, so with LLMs, right? And we see the AI overviews. What do you think about the possibility that we'll start to see ads in ChatGPT, or that Google's PPC auction, instead of it being the blue links above the fold that appear before organic, or even above or below the AI overviews, what do you think that there's a possibility that there's going to be even ads injected into the AI overviews at some point, and that the model Google will shift their blue link model in ads?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to imagine that there won't be some type of advertising in these tools going forward. I mean, they have to. I don't know which, you know, monetization approach ChatGPT is eventually going to use, because we just don't have a lot of context for how OpenAI makes these decisions. But I think with Google, and they've already said multiple times that there's going to be ads in AI overviews. I don't know about you, but I think a lot of us just haven't seen that yet. Like they talk about it, but it hasn't actually rolled out yet. But I fully anticipate that there will be sponsored results in AI overviews. As far as like I know in like with Bing in the beginning when it was still called Bing Chat, there was sometimes they would answer something with the citation that came from an ad. So it would say ad next to the citation. I think that's a little sketchier. I think the minute that users feel like the answers have some level of like sponsored or advertised content in them, they're not going to enjoy the experience as much. But I do think like, you know, if there's some type of auction where somebody typed best pet insurance and the pet insurance companies want to bid to appear as an ad, I think that's perfectly normal to expect that these tools would have to do that at some point. And Google's already talked about doing that. I think they're just trying to get it right by advertisers.
Yeah, this isn't one of those things that they just want to like fuck it, ship it.
Yeah,
Obviously, they've got their massive revenue base, and they're trying to get their 12% year-over-year growth. And
for sure.
the blue links, that's where most of it comes from. So they have to be very thoughtful about the CTR and what the CTR will be on the ads and how they can monetize that with the advertisers. And that's also why I think that in Google Ads, we haven't seen the use of generative AI inside Google Ads to build ad campaigns. We actually just released on Tuesday Auto Google Ads, which is an automated ad creation suite for businesses. But I was a little bit surprised that they haven't released generative AI to build ad campaigns yet. And I have to imagine they're testing, but because this is like the eye of the storm for them, this is like where they make all their money. They don't want to just blindly do something. They want to be really careful and cautious. And so it could take a while before we see some shifts there, but I think it's inevitable that something's coming.
Yeah, for sure. Be interesting to see.
Yeah. Lily, tell me about like your Google Discover case studies. I know you're proud of these and you've done a lot of work on them, and I'd love to learn more about that.
For sure, yeah. I feel very fortunate to be in a position, having worked at the agency that I work at called AMSIV for over 7 years now. We service a ton of companies that have a lot of Google Discover traffic, and especially in the last, let's say, like 5 years, we've really developed a specialization in SEO for news and publisher websites, which leads to even more data and more visibility into Google Discover, because unfortunately, it's not super easy to see what's happening in Google Discover unless you have access to the data itself, or you have one of the few tools that is kind of like projecting what's happening in there. There's not a lot right now, but there's a few. So because we have so much data, like right now I'm doing an aggregate just analysis just for me to see what's happening. And I'm using 60 different domains that have 240 million combined clicks across 700,000 URLs. So like not every company can see this. So because we've been able to see this, and because we've been able to kind of analyze that data at scale, you really start to see a lot of patterns in Google Discover, and you really see what works and what doesn't. So I want to say like 2020 or 2021, I started building a process for auditing sites in Google Discover just based on what we've learned. We've learned a ton. It's not all out there on the internet. It's a lot of it's what we've learned doing, like looking behind the scenes and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And now we help clients with Google Discover audits that are separate from our SEO audits, because it really is a different platform and it works in different ways. So these can be sometimes anywhere from like 80 to 120 pages of just all custom findings that we found based on what's working for the client, what we think will work, what's happening in the competitive landscape, what are some trends and patterns as far as like the content that does work in there, what can we learn from that? You talked about, topical authority earlier. That's a really big focal point for us in Google Discover. Some sites see completely different performance in search than they see in Discover as far as which topics work for them. So when it comes to Discover, we really have to think about how can we do this SEO strategy, do what works for SEO, but also think about what works in Google Discover, because they can actually more often than not be two completely different strategies.
Interesting. I've seen some case studies from one of my friends, Irfan, and he was telling me about with Google Discover, he noticed that sites or pages that get a significant amount of traffic very quickly have a higher likelihood to be found inside Google Discover. And that if you can, like if you can, let's say, make content go viral, either send it to your email list or it's like a news breaking, something with some urgency or temporality to it, that it's a higher likelihood that it can be featured in Google Discover. Have you seen the same, or have you seen something different?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think there's a variety of different factors at play there. When Google has like a sense that something is viral or very engaging or it's getting picked up in a lot of places, I think that's at the very least like a discovery signal for them to say, should we consider this content for Google Discover? So for example, I posted on my personal blog earlier this week what I learned last week at the Google event in New York. And because I have a big social following, usually when I share something on social and it does okay, it starts to get some traction, people start visiting the site, that's a source of discovery for Google Discover to say, like, is this something that Discover audiences would also enjoy? People that are also interested in SEO or whatever it is. And turns out, yes, that article did well in Google Discover. So I think it's not necessarily just about the traffic, but I think it's about the signals that they're seeing that something's really engaging and people are really enjoying it and sharing it across a lot of different platforms. But that being said, there's a lot of like content policies within Google Discover that people don't always fully understand. So that doesn't work for any piece of content. If that piece of content is about something that falls into their gray area of what you can and can't talk about in Discover, it won't appear in Discover at all. And I think a lot of companies are oblivious to the fact that they're producing all this really great content that's really engaging and doing really, really well in SEO, but it's actually against the rules of what works in Google Discover.
Okay.
So
no
it's not every piece of
testosterone content, no Viagra, content is
Yeah,
going to show up
not
in Discover.
really.
Okay.
No, sometimes you'll see that like the highest traffic content for sites in SEO is all the adult content,
Yeah.
and all that content has zero Discover traffic.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense that they would filter it out. This is one of the things I love about the SEO industry is that in the, I don't know, I've been doing this for 10 years. In the 10 years time that I've been doing this, I think I've seen every kind of business walk through like our doors, like come and approach us like, hey, can you help me with your SEO? In all these industries that I didn't even know existed. I don't want to like be specific because I want to keep it at least relatively PG-13. This isn't the R-rated edition of the podcast, so I'm not going to be specific. But it's just amazing how many people have been able to build a great business online through search. And I'll just
Oh
leave it at
yeah.
that.
There's a niche for everything and there's search volume for almost everything you can imagine. And so SEO is still the Wild West in that sense, especially for like adult topics. There's so much volume, so much demand, but that content just can't do well in Discover. Google hasn't given us a way to say, can you have an adult Discover? Like they don't have that, you
No,
know?
no.
Yeah,
And in the keyword search volume reporting, they're not going to tell us how much SV those keywords get. And so it's kind of like the big, this entire like closed circle where you just can't see what's there. Only way that
for
people are
sure.
getting that information is through the clickstream data, like they were able
For
to
sure.
get from Jump Shot many, many, many years ago. Other sources have emerged, but even then, that data is kind of, I mean, it's a small data panel. It's not representative of the entire internet,
For
but super
sure.
cool. Um, Lily, just because we're coming up on time here, really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed this conversation. For people that I guess, well, first, what are you looking forward to the most this year? It's only March. What's ahead that you're looking forward to most?
Yeah, at this point, it's some new tools that I'm testing and experimenting with, particularly as it relates to LLM visibility and what's happening in the different LLMs and what it takes to appear there, including Google's AI mode. Just got access to that, so I'm excited to see that. That's really a new frontier, as we've talked about, and it feels like being a kid again. Feels like being 20 years old back at the first job that I ever had. I'm just like learning all this stuff from scratch. So I think that's really fun and exciting, and also just Google Discover because for better for worse, Google's cracked down on a lot of things in SEO, but they really haven't cracked down on as much in Discover. So we're seeing a lot of success with that with our clients.
Super cool. Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that as much. So definitely, probably a lot of opportunity for now, right? Before
For sure.
more people get into it. Awesome.
There's a reason I don't talk about it very much.
Yeah. And Lily, where can people find you online if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, I always tell people just Google my name. It's Lily Ray, and you can choose your platform of choice. But I do post daily on X and Blue Sky and LinkedIn at least. But I also have a personal website, so you can contact me through there.
Perfect. All right, and we'll pop those in the show notes as well. Okay, Lily, thank
Awesome.
you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed this discussion, and I look forward to seeing you in SEO Week.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome.